Hello, I'm Kochanski, Wilderness Living Skills and Survival Instructor, specializing in the boreal forest. The topic here is going to focus on a few minutes on the skill of feather stick making, the use of the knife to make shavings, and so on. The knife needs to be sharp. You have to have an appropriate tool. Here we have a knife that has many features that I like: a good handle, continuous curvature, what we call a Scandi grind, which makes it easy for a lot of people to succeed in the business of making feathers. And the feather stick situation is where you take a fine slice. Over here we got a weathered tree, and that weathered tree, the outside surface is crumbly. We are cleaning it off, and you'll notice there's a comfortable stroke here, somewhere close to elbow to fingertip. The first few cuts are to clean off, and then after that we start making shavings. And you know the shavings are starting to develop when they don't fall off because of the crumbly nature of the surface. Any old wood doesn't do this. One of the problems here is I got different hardnesses, so as a result the knife is skittering here going along there. Now we are making kindling, and the kindling is so fine that a flame will make it ignite almost instantaneously. That's the whole objective behind fire lighting aspect of making kindling. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 curls. A student passes at 4 curls, an instructor achieves 20 very readily. Because this is in a spiral, we often call that a bugle. And if you control your knife so it's a coil, then we call we have different names for some of these things. But the whole idea is when you're trying to light a fire, you strike a match or you strike a spark with a metal match, and you have to have material fine enough that it ignites. And the knife can produce this. Now you can imagine here that I have come up to a tree that's vertical and it's raining. I take a position where my back acts as a roof to protect the work that I'm doing, and I may take a sufficient number of strokes. Now the number of shavings that you produce is connected with a notion we call critical mass. Experience tells you just how many shavings are going to work, and a bundle that may be fairly wet from the rain has been prepared. The shavings are lit, and you might have 75 shavings that will then dry out the bundle and ignite the bundle. The situation here is that I am showing you right off the bat one of the most dependable, powerful ways of lighting a fire. Now when you're going to light this with a split paper match, which is a challenge for the learner, you're making sure that your curls are very, very fine. That's a very fine curl. And once you get a few fine curls, which when they ignite, if there's too many of them, they're just going to flare off in a flash, and your curls after that become very coarse. And here's a coarse curl. Now a split paper match may not ignite that particular curl, but a few of these fine ones would. So you'll find that you want some of each, perhaps a quarter of the very fine curls, and then the rest can be the coarser ones, which will sustain themselves and burn more effectively than if you tried to have all fine curls. You want variety, sort of thing. Now the simplest thing here is to take a standing tree, which you didn't have to cut down, you didn't have to split, and you make all these shavings, and of all I know you make 100, and light those. The metal match very readily, properly stroked, will light that as it sits there, and you have a fire going in probably the quickest way, provided you have a sharp knife and you have matches, sort of thing. Now there are other curls. You may not find these bigger trees. You might have to pick on sticks the size of a finger. Now, of course, you might want to have a stick that's weathered. Generally, when we're talking about feather stick making for training purposes, elbow to fingertip and thumb in thickness or thereabouts. So here we have that stick, and you make feathers with this. Now, straight grained, knot free wood. First few slices, take the bark off, and then you tend to want to use up a great deal of your stick, 3/4 of it at least, half of it, 3/4, and you'll find every wood acts differently. So I have to accommodate the material I'm working with. That's where experience comes from. The part of your knife that produces the most gorgeous curls is the curved portion. So if your knife is curved for the whole length of the blade, you will find it doesn't matter where you use it. But many knives, the curved portion starts about the last third from the tip, and that's where you tend to use the finest touch. When you are feathering, you'll learn that the feel is for riding the edge of the knife next to the blade comfortably, so actually there is more pressure against the stick than there is going forward sometimes. And that light touch gives you these fine curls. And by the time you do about 30 or 40 of these, you get the lightest touch and you start looking like a magician in what you're doing. Notice we go to the very bottom of the cut. First thing I see a lot of students learning is they stop. Next thing you know, their curls are only this long because they aren't going right to the bottom and pretty well stopping at one point like this. Now, the best configuration for getting a fire going when you're using these free sticks is to have all the shavings coming off of one side, or perhaps you're allowed to have them but in one plane. That is, you don't make a fuzzy spruce tree out of this. You make a kind of a flat arrangement, so when these are laid together, they're going to be in a configuration that gives you the least amount of trouble lighting it and so on. And you start with 7. But in some cases, when you're lighting a signal fire and you don't have the benefit of fine twigs, you may have to have, from 25 to 50 feather sticks, depending on the size. It's obvious that if I make feathers from a finger thick stick or a thumb thick stick or much thicker stick, that you're going to get different effects, and experience tells you just how many feathers you need to make a proper signal fire go off. Now, sometimes you want to do a lot of feather stick making, which generally in the instructional situation, this involves taking a piece of wood and splitting out the feathers. Here, for example, is a type of wood here that you would save for trade shows and so on. Very straight grained. A lot of people like this to be spruce. This is a piece that's big enough for maybe 4 feathers, and we have very straight grained material. Now, there are 3 things that come into success at any type of operation. One is what you know. If you don't know what you're doing, no matter how good your knife, no matter how good the material, you don't really do well. So you've got to know about your knife, your tool. Many knives are not configured or sharpened in a way where they will make feathers very readily. Well, here we've got very straight grained material, very dry, very well cured, very rare in the natural environment. You look at the issue of the grain, and the grain is going to be pretty predictable because you split the stick out rather than have it sawn as lumber. Then you will find that there will be 3 choices, and those choices relate to, is your slice going to be off the edge like this? Is it going to be off the edge here or in between? So, for example, here we've got a corner that's available to us, and sometimes that corner lends itself to much finer work than tangent or 90 degrees to the tangent. And so you have to test your individual piece of wood and see how it behaves, you might say, because the results can all be different. Well, here we're off the edge of the rings right there, and we're getting one result, which is pretty good. This is tangent to the annual rings. This one here, that would be a corner with to the flat of the annual rings. And in some cases I would find that's more predictable. That's not going to work as well as off the edges, or not off the edges. But here you can see that the nature of the annual rings are kind of crumbly, whereas 90 degrees to the annual rings, you get a very smooth action, and so on. It's obvious that wood without knots is going to work the best. Now, there are many things you can do with feathers. Like, for example, you wake up in the morning and there's embers in your fire if you dig around in the ash and so on. So you usually make two feathers, fairly dense, to pick up that ember with the feathers themselves. And it might even be smaller than this. And so you quickly make up one, cut it off, there's one, and then you do a second one. For good luck, always go for 7. And so you have your twigs and everything ready. You shift the ashes with a stick, and you take your 2 feathers and you pick up your coal between them, blow them into flame, set them under your fire. One of the quickest ways. There are so many things that make life easier if you have an appropriately sharpened knife. Now, when we're talking survival knives, the longer you might spend with me, the more you realize why I'm kind of opinionated about certain things. This knife has all the features that I discerned because the maker has asked me to itemize the features. A very strong knife, not too big, not too small, very difficult to break, having those sort of properties. Kind of heavy, and one property this knife has that bothers some people is the fact that the corners at the back of the knife are so sharp that one of the things that I can do with that corner is make scrapings. Now, scrapings are not made with just any old stick. Here's a peeled willow stick where you find the scrapings here. Now, sometimes that's the quickest way to get material that will light with the metal match. The metal match we're talking about being this huge lighter flint that sets the grass on fire from a standing position. The makers of these flints, they never have really resolved the scraper. I resolve it by making sure that the back of my knife is very sharp. That is, should I put the knife there and start pounding on it, I might even find those corners are quite uncomfortable. But at any rate, the feathers that you're producing purposely for fire lighting are fine and ignitable. They have to follow up the definition of kindling is when you hold the flame on and you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is it burning? The other aspect of the feather stick making is in the issue of building things. Should you build an axe handle or a canoe paddle or whatever, that the sharp knife produces such a smooth glazed surface, and the material you're building your canoe out of, when it exhibits quality feathering, it means that you're going to have a handle that's not going to wear your hands raw, or you're going to find the smoothness of your knife that your knife produces is adequate to meet all needs with regard to the construction of that implement, sort of thing. So that's the importance of feathering. And there is probably standard feather. Stroke here, I guess.